They mocked her at boot camp, then went pale seeing the tattoo from Operation Phantom Dust. The quiet murmurs of boot camp turned into sharp whispers when the new recruit's tattoo was accidentally revealed, the infamous emblem from Operation Phantom Dust. What the others saw as just ink, they didn't understand was a legacy forged in shadows, sacrifice, and silent courage. Rowan, a young woman who carried a past heavier than most could imagine, endured mocking laughter and cold stares from those who underestimated her. But when a commanding officer stepped forward, revealing the same tattoo beneath his uniform, the room fell into stunned silence. What followed was not a story of violence, but one of quiet honor and the reclaiming of respect, a journey that would forever change how they saw her and how she saw herself. And before I forget, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories reach. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to our channel so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. I guarantee you won't want to miss it. Now let's jump in. The bus hissed as it stopped at the edge of the base. Dust curled under its tires, fading into the dry afternoon air. Recruits filed out with stiff limbs and anxious glances, duffel bags slung over their shoulders, hopes and nerves buried under crisp regulation uniforms. Among them, she stepped down last. Thin, quiet, and barely 20, she moved like someone who didn't want to take up space. Her uniform was regulation tight, her boots still too new to carry weight. But her eyes, dark, still, far older than her face, gave away something the others hadn't lived long enough to understand. No one knew her name yet. The tag on her chest read M. Rowan. Just another number in a system designed to strip identity and rebuild it. And it worked, usually. Move, string bean. A louder recruit barked, jostling past her. His tone wasn't cruel. Not yet, but it didn't carry respect, either. Just the usual boot camp bravado, aimed at anyone quiet enough to target. Rowan didn't respond. She just adjusted the strap of her bag and kept walking, eyes fixed on the path ahead. Inside the barracks, she took a bunk in the corner, not because she was told to, but because it gave her the best view of the door, the windows, and the exits. Old habits, muscle memory. None of the others noticed. By dinner, her silence had already become a punchline. She a ghost or something? Someone asked. Maybe she doesn't speak English. She looks like she's about to cry. Rowan just ate her food and folded her tray napkin 3 times before getting up. She didn't flinch, didn't glare, didn't crack. Just moved with that same eerie calm. Later that night, as the others were laughing or cursing about push-ups and chow quality, Rowan knelt by her bunk and carefully unzipped her duffel bag. Inside, a pair of dog tags on a black cord. She paused before picking them up, fingers brushing over the worn engraving. One tag had her name, the other didn't. She closed her eyes, holding both gently in her fist. Just for a second. No medals, no patches. No one in that room knew that she'd already served. No one had asked why her uniform, though clean, was stitched a little differently, like it had once belonged to someone else. Or why, when the drill instructor shouted at full volume the next morning, Rowan didn't even blink. She didn't stand out, not yet. But in time, they'd all remember the moment they saw the tattoo. They just didn't know it yet. Not that she cared. She wasn't here to be noticed. She was here to keep a promise. And somewhere under that regulation shirt, just between her shoulder blades, was a mark no one dared talk about. Not if they'd seen what it meant. Not if they knew what Operation Phantom Dust really was. By the second week, the nicknames started. Sergeant Mute, Ghost Girl, Private Shadow. She'd earned them not by trying, but by not. She didn't gossip, didn't complain, didn't flinch when the others were punished for someone else's mistake. Rowan just watched, endured, and moved like someone who'd already done this once, in a different life. The others didn't know how to handle that. There's a strange thing about group discomfort. When someone doesn't fit, the crowd doesn't always try to understand. They isolate. And that isolation turns sharp. Come on, Rowan, one of the louder guys said during a break, tossing a boot lace at her from across the barracks. Say something. You a robot? Or just got nothing up there? The laughter came easily. Nervous. Pack mentality. They were kids, most of them. 18, 19, still carrying high school rivalries and half-grown egos. She just stared at him, her gaze unreadable. Not angry, not wounded, just quiet. That silence was louder than any comeback. You know what I heard? Someone whispered later in the mess line. She wasn't even supposed to be here. Some admin screw up. They let a civvy in by mistake. I heard she's just doing this for college money. I heard her dad was the real soldier, and she's trying to make up for it. She heard it all, but she never responded. At night, she'd sit by her bunk and wrap her wrist in athletic tape. A small movement, discreet, but precise. Her fingers moved like they remembered breaks and sprains. She checked her boots twice a day. She tied her laces the way operators did, looped low, tucked in, silent. But none of them noticed. Not yet. One evening, after lights out, one of the younger girls in her unit, a redhead named Avery, whispered across the dark, "Why don't you talk much?" Rowan was quiet a long time before answering. "When it matters, I do." Avery blinked in the dark, surprised she answered at all. "You've done this before, haven't you?" Rowan didn't answer that. But in the morning, when Avery found a blister kit tucked neatly under her pillow, she understood. And so did the staff sergeant 2 days later during hand-to-hand drills. Because when Rowan's opponent came in too fast, too cocky, and tried to sweep her legs, she didn't fall. She pivoted, redirected, and had him flat on his back in 2 seconds, arm pinned. The instructor narrowed his eyes. "You train somewhere?" Rowan just shook her head. But her stance, low, balanced, controlled, spoke louder than words. The instructor didn't press her. He just marked something in his notebook, quietly, and walked away, because he'd seen that stance once before, in phantom dust. And if that was what he thought it was on her shoulder blade, the scarred ink only visible when her shirt rode up during that takedown, then none of these kids had a clue who they were mocking. Not yet, but soon. 2 days later, the questions started circling higher up. Staff Sergeant Ellis stood outside the captain's office holding a thin manila folder with one hand, the other balled into a fist behind his back. He wasn't a man easily shaken. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, he'd done the tour cycle 3 times. Seen kids rise and break under pressure. But this Rowan, didn't fit the pattern. "She's off book, sir," Ellis said quietly as the captain gestured him in. The folder landed with a soft slap on the metal desk. The captain opened it with one brow raised. Inside, 3 pages. Name, blood type, height, clearance code. No deployment history. No listed former unit. No psychological evaluations. No disciplinary record, and no commendations either. Just a flat, government sterile record with too many blacked out lines. "This is all she's got?" the captain asked, flipping the pages, frowning deeper with each turn. Ellis nodded once. "I tried pulling her digital file. Access denied. Even asked a guy I know at CENTCOM. They wouldn't touch it." The captain squinted. "Why not?" Ellis just tapped the final page. At the bottom, typed in small black letters. "Transitional reentry. Candidate authorized. Monitor, don't interfere." There was no signature. Just a code, DSC-03. The captain leaned back in his chair. "No one gets reentry from that level unless," he paused, "unless they're part of something black enough to disappear from their own paperwork." Ellis nodded again. His voice lowered, almost reverent now. "Sir, the way she moves. The way she scans a room. She flinches at nothing, but her head always knows where the exits are. She doesn't compete, she calculates. It's like watching a ghost that used to be a machine." The captain looked up, tension building in his jaw. "You think she's dust?" "I don't know, sir. But I saw it once. Kandahar. 2019. We were sweeping an abandoned field hospital. Thought it was clear. Then these 2 guys showed up. Beards, boots, no patches. Silent. They cleared 5 rooms in 40 seconds, like they already knew the layout. No words. No noise. Just signals." He paused. One of them had a mark. Right below the collar. It looked like a black flame behind a skull. The captain stilled. That mark was the unofficial sigil of Operation Phantom Dust, a mission so classified it didn't exist. Not on paper, not in the system. Only in scars, sealed walls, and the silence of the ones who came back from it. If you could even call it coming back. Phantom dust wasn't a unit. It was an erase. An option used when diplomacy, SEALs, even Tier 1 groups couldn't be sent in. Dust was for places where maps lied, where even rescue teams didn't return. It was meant for ghosts, and no one who served in it talked about it. Because if you survived, you were never the same. And if you didn't, no one ever said your name. Back in the barracks, Rowan sat alone on her bunk. She was rewrapping her wrist with athletic tape, slow and methodical, each movement precise like she'd done it 1,000 times before, with bullets flying overhead. Across the room, the same recruits who'd mocked her earlier were gathered around a phone, laughing at a meme someone had sent about silent types always breaking first. She heard it, didn't flinch, just finished the wrap, tugged her sleeve down, and closed her eyes for a moment. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. A storm was coming, not from the sky, but from her past. And soon, even those laughing wouldn't be able to ignore it, because someone was going to see the tattoo, and everything would change. The announcement came just after sunrise. Today, full unit urban simulation, squad-based movement, rules of engagement enforced, live observers, no real ammunition. The recruits shuffled in line outside the mock city, a concrete maze of hollowed buildings and alleys built to mimic foreign war zones. Broken down cars, charred doorways, crates stacked like cover. It looked like a movie set, but smelled of sun-baked concrete and tension. Some grinned, excited. Others fidgeted. Rowan stood in the middle of it all, still, calm, like someone who'd already walked these streets in another lifetime, but with real stakes. The instructors barked names, assigning squads. Rowan landed in Bravo 3 for recruits she barely knew, including Avery and two of the loudest boys, Cruz and Hendricks, the ones who laughed hardest when she said nothing. Great, Cruz muttered. Ghost girls in our squad. Guess we'll lose by default. Rowan didn't respond. She didn't need to. Inside the simulation zone, the mission began. Clear buildings, identify hostiles, extract a wounded ally from the center of the zone. Timed. Monitored. It started with confusion. Cruz tried taking point, but fumbled his comms. Hendricks barked orders like he'd seen a war movie once and thought that made him tactical. They nearly missed a marker right out of the gate. Avery glanced at Rowan. You okay? Rowan just nodded once, her eyes scanning rooftops. 15 minutes in, Bravo 3 breached their first building. Inside, dark hallways, stairwells, open windows. Then chaos. One of the opposing units set off a flash simulation device. Sound burst. Smoke filled the air. Hendricks panicked and fired a paint round blindly, hitting Cruz in the leg. Technically dead. Seriously, dude? Cruz shouted. You just killed me. You moved into my line of fire. No, you. Shut it, Rowan said quietly. Both men froze. It was the first time most of them had heard her speak with authority. And when she stepped forward, her hands moved in a blur, checking corners, waving Avery forward, motioning Hendricks to cover. They followed, without thinking, because in that moment, something shifted. She wasn't improvising. She was remembering. 20 minutes later, Bravo 3 was the only squad to reach the center point without any simulated civilian casualties. Avery dragged the wounded dummy to the evac zone while Rowan directed cover fire. Observers in the tower above began whispering to one another. What's her name again? Rowan. Rowan. She run Black Flag tactics in a bootcamp sim? Yeah. Who taught her that? No one answered. Because no one knew. Back at the debrief, the other squads trickled in. Most looked frustrated. A few laughed it off. One recruit was limping from a knee scrape. Bravo 3 sat in silence. The instructor called out. Only one squad made it to evac in time. No civilian hits. Team leader, Rowan. Heads turned. Half the room blinked like they hadn't heard right. The other half tried to understand how. Even Cruz and Hendricks stayed quiet. As Rowan stood up, the back of her shirt lifted ever so slightly, just enough to reveal a curved line of ink high on her spine. A black flame. And inside it, the outline of a skull. Avery saw it first. She didn't ask. She just stared and understood. The sim was over. But the real mission, the one Rowan never volunteered for, had just begun. It started in whispers. Always does. Not shouted, not said outright. Just passed from mouth to mouth, like rumors laced with awe and confusion. You see that ink on her back? Yeah. Looked like a skull inside flame. Creepy. Nah, man. That's a dust mark. I swear it. You think she's legit? Dude, dust isn't real. It's just something old vets talk about when they're drunk. But not everyone dismissed it. Not the instructors. Not the observers. And not Staff Sergeant Ellis, who stood outside the simulation tower, arms folded, eyes locked on Rowan as she exited the debriefing room. She didn't notice him watching. Or maybe she did, but didn't care. She walked straight past a group of recruits who had mocked her just last week. They parted, silently, unsure if they were supposed to move, unsure if she noticed them at all. That was the thing about Rowan. She didn't command attention, but people noticed when she passed. Not because she demanded it, but because she'd earned it, without saying a word. That night, the barracks were quieter than usual. No jokes, no jabs. Even crews didn't speak when Rowan walked in. He just sat on his bunk, elbows on his knees, replaying every decision he'd made in the simulation, realizing just how badly he'd messed up and how she had held the line without flinching. She wasn't their punchline anymore. She was something else. Something they didn't understand yet. Avery waited until lights out to speak again. Is it real? She whispered. Rowan was lying on her side, facing the wall. Phantom dust. Avery continued. The flame, the skull. It's real, isn't it? Rowan stayed silent for a long time. The silence stretched long enough to make Avery almost regret asking. Then, quietly, it's not a unit. Avery blinked. What? It's not a unit, Rowan repeated. It's an agreement. You go somewhere nobody else will. Do what nobody else can. And if you come back, you forget you were ever there. She paused. But your body remembers. Your sleep. Your skin. Avery didn't ask anything else. There was weight in Rowan's voice. Not anger, not drama. Just experience. Like someone who had screamed once, long ago, until her voice disappeared into stone walls and closed doors. Why come back? Avery whispered. Why enlist again? Rowan rolled onto her back, staring at the ceiling. Then quietly, just above a breath. I made a promise. She didn't explain. Didn't need to. Because sometimes, the deepest loyalty doesn't come from orders. It comes from loss. And Rowan hadn't come here to prove anything. She'd come to finish something. It rained the next morning. Not a heavy downpour. Just that cold, soaking drizzle that seeps into your boots and makes the air smell like rust and mud. Recruits groaned as they jogged across the lot for formation, soaked to the bone, slipping on wet concrete. Rowan didn't complain. She was already outside before the call, standing still in the downpour. Her shirt clung to her shoulders. The dog tags around her neck hung like anchors, the smaller one thudding softly against her chest. The one with no name. Avery jogged up beside her, panting. Hut up. You're out here early. Rowan nodded once. Storms help me think. The drill instructors barked orders, calling for weapons training. The group moved into formation, heading toward the range. Rowan walked last, quiet as ever, her fingers brushing the tags once before tucking them under her shirt. The range was cold steel and cracked concrete. Rows of rifles lined the benches. Targets flapped in the wind, 100 yards downfield. The recruits lined up in pairs, loading blanks and practicing breathing control. The usual complaints echoed down the line. Triggers gritty. Who designed these sights? Can't even see through the fog. Rowan said nothing. She stepped up to her lane, adjusted the stock against her shoulder, and waited. Let's see if the quiet one can shoot, someone muttered behind her. Then, crack, 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 for clean shots. Center mass. Tight cluster. Even the instructor paused. He watched the recoil, the breathing, the control. Where'd you learn that grouping? He asked flatly. Rowan didn't look at him. I had a good teacher. He narrowed his eyes. Name? Rowan was silent for a moment. Then she reached under her shirt and pulled out the second tag, the nameless one. Micah Rowan, she said. My brother. The instructor's posture shifted. I remember that name, he said softly. Kia. Kandahar. 2022. Rowan nodded once. He died 2 weeks after the mission. Never woke up. It wasn't loud. No drama. Just a quiet fact. Avery, standing beside her, turned slightly. Was he? Dust too. Rowan's jaw tensed. She stared down the range. He never talked about it, she said. But he wore the mark. And the night before he shipped out, he asked me to do one thing. What? Rowan finally looked at Avery, and for the first time, there was fire behind her eyes. To finish what he started. Later that evening, back in the barracks, the rain still tapped the window. Rowan sat cross-legged on her bunk, holding the blank dog tag in her palm. She wasn't praying, just remembering. Across from her, Cruz watched quietly. No jokes now. No eye rolls. Just the kind of silence people reserve for gravesides or folded flags. He didn't understand her, but he was starting to respect her. One story at a time. By the third week, Rowan wasn't invisible anymore. But she still wasn't one of them. They'd stopped mocking her. That much was clear. Even Cruz kept his mouth shut during drills, offering the occasional nod when she walked past. But respect doesn't always mean belonging, and Rowan wasn't looking for either. She still sat alone at chow, still volunteered for cleanup without being asked, still moved with that same focused discipline. Every action deliberate, efficient, minimal. The others began calling it combat calm. The instructors called it control. It was during the night ops drill that things shifted again. The recruits were paired off for a blackout navigation exercise. No maps, no lights, no instructors, just the stars, a compass, and miles of open terrain. Cruz was her partner. He didn't look happy about it. "I'm not saying I don't trust you," he muttered as they jogged out toward the woods. "But you walk like you've already buried someone here." Rowan didn't answer. 3 miles in, they lost the trail. The forest was dense, thick branches clawing the sky, fog rising between the trees like smoke from a forgotten war. Cruz panicked first. His compass spun, off by 6 degrees. He wanted to head uphill, but Rowan stopped him with one outstretched hand. "Wind's wrong," she said. He blinked. "What?" "Listen." He paused, hearing nothing, just the rustle of leaves. Then it hit him. The pattern. The wind wasn't pushing north like it should have. They'd drifted into a depression in the land, and if they climbed now, they'd end up walking parallel to the target instead of toward it. "How do you know that?" he asked. She just adjusted the compass and moved forward. 10 minutes later, they found the waypoint beacon. First team back. The instructors were stunned. Cruz looked at her like he'd seen a ghost. "You don't talk much," he said, panting. "But damn, you see everything." She shrugged. "I had a lot of practice getting lost." It was the first time he laughed with her instead of at her. The next day, the drill instructor pulled Staff Sergeant Ellis aside during weapons maintenance. "Rowan," he said low, "you watching?" Ellis nodded. "She doesn't blink. She doesn't brag. Doesn't push herself to show off. But when things go sideways, everyone looks at her." Ellis said nothing. "Any other recruit, I'd say she's dangerous," the instructor added. "But she doesn't use it. Not to lead. Not to dominate." Ellis gave a small smile. "She's not trying to win," he said. "She's trying to endure." Later that night, Avery spotted her kneeling by her bunk again, unwrapping the athletic tape. But beneath the layers, Avery noticed something new. A line of scar tissue across Rowan's wrist. Not fresh. Old. Surgical. Clean. "What happened?" she asked, startled. Rowan looked up. "Cobble. Building collapsed. Pinned under debris. Nerve damage." Avery swallowed. "And they let you come back here?" "No," Rowan said quietly. "They didn't." The days blurred into weeks, each one folding quietly into the next. Boot camp had a relentless rhythm. Drill, run, shoot, sleep, repeat, and most recruits learned to dread it less with time. But for Rowan, it wasn't the physical exhaustion that weighed heaviest. It was the silence that followed her like a shadow, the invisible barrier erected by others, the unspoken distance between us and her. She never complained, never raised her voice, never broke under pressure. But beneath the steady exterior, the burden of her past pressed down with invisible hands, a weight no one else could see. During rare breaks between exercises, Rowan would sit alone, shoulders squared but eyes distant, as if the memories she carried were worlds apart from the boot camp grounds. The scar behind her wrist, the dog tags hidden under her uniform, the tattoo etched deep into her back, all reminders of a life she rarely let surface. One afternoon, as the sun softened and the others were scattered around the courtyard, Avery approached her with something crumpled in her hand. The young woman hesitated, then extended it gently. "Who's this?" Avery asked softly, holding out a worn photograph, its edges curled and faded from time. Rowan took the photo with care. The image showed a younger man, in well-worn fatigues, his eyes bright and full of hope. He smiled, a genuine, open smile, the kind that feels impossible to fake. That was Micah Rowan, her brother, the one who had disappeared long before she re-entered boot camp. She stared down at the picture, fingers tracing the creases as if to pull the memory closer. "He was the reason I kept going," she said quietly, voice barely above a whisper. Avery nodded, understanding that some stories are too heavy to tell fully, yet too important to ignore. "You don't have to say more," she offered gently. But Rowan shook her head slowly. "No," she replied. "You should know. Because people like him, they don't just disappear. They stay with you. In every choice. Every step." The weight of that truth hung between them, heavier than any words. That evening, the barracks were unusually still. The usual chatter was replaced by a quiet tension. Suddenly, the sharp crackle of the PA system cut through the calm. "All recruits report to the auditorium immediately. Briefing on upcoming deployment." Whispers rippled through the rooms like wildfire. Deployment. The word itself carried so many meanings: pride, fear, uncertainty. For some recruits, it was a call to prove themselves, a chance to be seen as more than just trainees. For others, it brought dread, fear of the unknown, of leaving home, of never returning. For Rowan, the word was a ghost, a stark reminder of missions past, promises broken, and losses buried deep. In the cavernous auditorium, recruits filled the seats with nervous energy. The commanding officer stepped to the podium, his presence commanding but his voice solemn. "You've trained hard," he began, "and you're ready. Soon, some of you will deploy overseas in support of ongoing operations." His gaze swept the room. "For some, this will be your first mission. For others, your next." Rowan felt every word strike like a hammer, resonating between past and present, mixing the ghost she thought she'd left behind with the reality pressing before her. The faces around her shifted, some eager, others quiet, many unsure. After the briefing, as the recruits slowly filed out, Avery hung back beside Rowan. "Are you ready?" she asked, voice low, eyes searching. Rowan didn't answer right away. She stared ahead, steady, composed. Finally, she met Avery's gaze and said, "I've never been more ready." There was no bravado in her voice, no boast, just a quiet resolve that said everything. The weeks that followed were a trial by fire in slow motion. Each day started with the metallic clang of boots against concrete, a relentless rhythm that drove the recruits from the early morning mist into the harsh glare of the afternoon sun. The cadence was precise, a metronome of discipline designed to break down the self and rebuild it anew. Rowan moved with the unit, fitting into the formation without breaking it, but she remained separate, not by defiance or arrogance, but by an unspoken presence that set her apart. Her silence wasn't emptiness, it was weight, a quiet storm waiting beneath the calm exterior. She spoke only when necessary. Her words were measured, carefully chosen, and carried the weight of experience that none of the others possessed. When she did speak, people listened, not because she commanded attention, but because there was an unmistakable authority behind her restraint. One afternoon, the unit gathered in the dusty confines of the close-quarters combat training compound. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and dirt, tension crackling beneath the surface like static before a storm. The recruits paired off, gloves on, eyes sharp. Rowan faced a recruit named Jenkins, a towering figure with a loud mouth and a brash confidence that bordered on cockiness. He circled her like a predator, taunting her. "Hey, ghost girl," he sneered, voice dripping with contempt. "You sure you're not scared to fight? Maybe you'll disappear before you take a hit." Rowan's eyes didn't flicker. She didn't rise to bait. Instead, she studied his stance, how his weight shifted, the tension in his shoulders, the speed of his movements. When Jenkins lunged forward with a reckless strike, Rowan moved like a shadow, sidestepping with fluid grace. She used his momentum against him, spinning into a smooth sweep that brought him crashing down onto the padded floor. Silence rippled through the room. Even the instructors paused, exchanging glances. Jenkins struggled to his feet, flushed with a mixture of frustration and something else, respect. "Not bad," he muttered, wiping dust from his face. "You don't just fight, you think." Later, as the group dispersed, Cruz approached Rowan with a newfound respect evident in his eyes. "You're different," he said quietly. "You don't just throw punches. You move like someone who's seen what losing really means." Rowan nodded, her expression unreadable. "I'm not here to win," she said softly. "I'm here to endure. And to finish." That night, the barracks were cloaked in uneasy calm. The soft rustle of breathing, the creak of bunks settling, a world far removed from the day's chaos. Rowan lay on her bunk, eyes fixed on the ceiling where faint cracks marred the paint. The weight of unspoken expectations pressed down on her, the memories she carried, the promises etched deep in her bones. A gentle knock interrupted the quiet. Avery stood at the doorway, clutching something folded and worn in her hands. "I found this," she whispered, stepping inside. Rowan sat up, taking the letter. The familiar handwriting on the aged paper pulled at something buried deep within her. It was from her mother. The letter spoke of hope and fear, of a family waiting, watching, and praying for her safe return. Words of love wrapped in the quiet strength that had kept Rowan grounded all these years. For the first time in what felt like forever, Rowan allowed herself a fragile smile. Because no matter what lay ahead, no matter how dark the road, she was not alone. And sometimes that was enough. The days grew heavier, each one marked by the relentless march toward an uncertain horizon. Deployment wasn't a distant possibility anymore. It was real, immediate, pressing down on every moment with the weight of inevitability. The horizon was no longer a vague outline on some far-off map. It was a shadow looming just beyond the barracks walls. Rowan moved through training with a quiet resolve, her every step measured and deliberate. Each drill, each exercise was a test, not just of skill, but of endurance. She was preparing for a future she'd been trying to face for years, yet it never felt any easier. Despite the repetition, the routine, the structure, something had shifted in the unit. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. A tension stretched taut beneath the surface, like a storm gathering just out of sight. That evening, after the day's exhausting drills, the recruits gathered in the common area. Laughter and chatter buzzed around the room, some nervous, some confident, but Rowan sat apart, a quiet island amid the noise. She was lost in thought, the weight of memories heavy behind her calm exterior. Avery approached, hesitating for a moment before sitting down beside her without a word. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was filled with understanding. Finally, Avery broke the quiet. "Do you ever think about what comes after? After boot camp? After deployment?" Rowan's eyes flicked toward her, steady and clear. "All the time," she said quietly. "But I don't dwell on it. Not yet." Avery nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes I wonder if we're really ready. If we can live with what we see." Rowan's gaze hardened, shadows flickering in her eyes. The weight of her past pressed behind her words. "We don't get to choose what we see," she said quietly. "Only how we carry it." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Avery didn't ask for more. She didn't need to. The following morning brought a briefing unlike any other. The commanding officer stepped forward, the gravity of the moment etched into every line on his weathered face. His voice was steady, but it carried the weight of unspoken truths. "Tomorrow, you deploy." The room fell silent. Whispers echoed in the air. Some recruits exchanged nervous glances. Others tried to mask fear behind forced smiles. The reality of what was coming had finally settled like a stone in their stomachs. Rowan felt a strange calm settle over her. It wasn't peace. It wasn't hope. It was the eye of the storm, still, focused, waiting. Later, as they prepared their gear in the quiet hum of the barracks, the subtle intensity in Rowan's actions did not go unnoticed. Staff Sergeant Ellis approached her, his voice low but firm. "You ready for this?" Rowan met his eyes, steady and unwavering. "I'm ready," she said simply. Ellis nodded slowly. "Good. Because once you step out there, there's no going back." Those words lingered in the air, heavy and irrevocable. That night, Rowan found herself sitting by the barracks window, staring out at the stars scattered across the night sky. The world outside was still calm, but inside her, the echoes of phantom dust whispered in the dark, memories and shadows that refused to be silenced. Avery found her there, sliding silently into the seat beside her. "You'll be okay," Avery said softly, breaking the quiet. Rowan turned to her, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. "Thanks," she said quietly. "I've been through worse." The two sat in silence, the night stretching on around them, tense, fragile, and filled with unspoken promises. The morning of deployment arrived with the sharp chill of early dawn, the kind that bites through layers and wakes every nerve. The sky was a muted gray, heavy with low clouds that threatened rain but held back, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The air was still, thick with anticipation and unspoken fears. Recruits moved quietly across the base, their faces tight with focus, eyes shadowed by the weight of what lay ahead. The usual energy of camaraderie and banter was replaced by a heavy silence. It was the calm before the storm, the collective moment when all the nerves, hopes, and fears compressed into a single, taut line. Rowan was among them, moving with the same calm precision she had cultivated over years. Her pack hung loosely over one shoulder, the dog tags around her neck catching the faint light like dull metal echoes of a past life. She blended into the crowd, a shadow in uniform, silent but present. The unit gathered on the parade ground for final inspection. The sergeant barked orders with a practiced sharpness, calling recruits to step forward and show their gear. "On me. Show me your kit. Uniforms tight, equipment secure," he commanded. Rowan stepped forward. The cool morning breeze tugged at the collar of her jacket. As she adjusted it, just for a fleeting moment, the fabric shifted, revealing a glimpse of the tattoo on her upper back. A black flame encircling a skull. The emblem, the mark of Operation Phantom Dust. A sudden gasp rippled through the assembled troops like a shockwave. Heads snapped around. Whispers rose instantly. Some recruits looked away, confused and unsure. Others leaned closer, their eyes wide with curiosity and disbelief. Avery, standing nearby, caught Rowan's eyes for a brief second. There was a flicker of surprise, then understanding. The recognition of the weight Rowan carried, the history sealed beneath her skin. The sergeant strode forward, his face stern but with a hint of something softer beneath. Respect, perhaps. He reached Rowan and lowered his voice to a near whisper. "You carry a heavy past," he said, voice low but deliberate. Rowan met his gaze steadily, the fire in her eyes calm but resolute. "I carry it with honor," she replied. The words hung between them, silent but powerful, a statement that spoke louder than any boast or defense. That moment changed everything. The quiet respect that had been simmering among the recruits now crystallized into something solid, something unbreakable. The mocking laughter and sideways glances ceased. No one dared to question or challenge the woman who bore the mark of the mission that few dared even speak about. Whispers faded into a respectful silence. Rowan was no longer just the quiet recruit who kept to herself. She was someone who carried history, a living testament to sacrifice, endurance, and unspoken courage. For the first time, the room wasn't just watching her. They were watching her story, and that story demanded honor. The deployment unfolded under a sky swollen with heavy clouds, a looming gray that seemed to press down on every soul in the unit. The thick air was dense with tension, each breath a reminder of the precariousness of their existence. The unit moved out in tight, practiced formation, boots striking the ground in unison, disciplined, precise. But beneath the surface of perfect alignment, uncertainty churned like an undercurrent threatening to break free. Rowan marched beside Avery, their steps in sync, the silence between them speaking volumes. They didn't need to fill the space with words. Shared experience was often a language all its own. In those long, grueling days that followed, the unit's routine blurred into a series of missions, debriefings, and nights punctuated by the distant, haunting echoes of gunfire and the crackle of radio static. Every moment was a test, not only of physical endurance, but of mental resilience. The pressure welded the recruits together in a way nothing else could. Bonds began to form, quiet but unbreakable, forged in the crucible of shared hardship and survival. These were the silent alliances, the brotherhoods and sisterhoods born not from choice, but from necessity. One evening, during a rare lull in operations, the squad gathered around a small campfire. The orange flames flickered against tired faces, casting long shadows and momentary warmth. There was laughter, tentative but genuine, as stories passed from one voice to another. Stories not just of combat or strategy, but of home, of family, of loss, and of hope. The kind of stories that remind you what you're fighting for, and what might still be waiting for you when the fighting ends. Rowan sat slightly apart, as was her way, watching the scene unfold. The stoic mask she wore most days softened just enough to allow the faintest smile when Cruz tried a clumsy joke. It was a small crack in the armor she carefully maintained, but enough to show the humanity beneath. Later that night, Cruz sought her out, stepping quietly beside her as she sat near the edge of the camp. "You don't have to carry it all alone," he said softly, eyes sincere. "We're your team now. Whatever's weighing you down, we share it." Rowan turned to him, eyes steady but softened by the rare offer of trust. For so long, she had carried her burdens in silence. The losses, the memories, the promises that clung to her like shadows. But now, in this harsh place far from home, something was changing. "Thank you," she said simply, the weight of her gratitude more profound than words could express. I know, in that moment, the invisible load that had pressed on her shoulders didn't feel quite so heavy. It was shared now, a burden divided among those who stood with her, unspoken but deeply understood. The bond was no longer just about survival. It was about trust, about belonging. A brotherhood forged in fire, tempered by honor. And for Rowan, that bond was a lifeline. The rhythmic hum of helicopter blades was a constant backdrop, a deep, steady thrum that vibrated through the air and into the bones of the squad. The heat pressed down relentlessly, dust swirling in every gust, coating their uniforms with a fine, gritty layer. Every step they took was cautious and deliberate. The dusty streets of the deployment zone were riddled with unseen threats, each corner concealing potential danger, each shadow a possible trap. Rowan moved through the chaos with a quiet confidence that commanded respect without words. The past she carried, the tattoo etched into her skin, the memories of phantom dust, was no longer a secret she hid beneath layers of fabric. It was a compass that guided her, a steady force in an unstable world. As the squad cleared a dilapidated building, Avery's eyes caught a strange symbol spray painted in faded black on one of the crumbling walls. She motioned quietly for Rowan to come closer. "Look," Avery whispered, pointing at the emblem. Rowan stepped forward, her fingers brushing the jagged edges of the paint. It was the same mark she bore on her back, a black flame encircling a skull, the emblem of Operation Phantom Dust. A hush fell over the group, the weight of recognition settling heavily on their shoulders. "Phantom Dust," Rowan said, her voice low and heavy with memory. The word itself seemed to echo, a whisper of a mission cloaked in shadows and sacrifice. No one knew exactly what the symbol meant here, a warning, a signature, or something more cryptic. But for Rowan, it was a stark reminder of the promises she still carried, the debts yet unpaid. That night, as the squad gathered around a flickering fire, Rowan broke her silence. She shared fragments of the story, a rare glimpse into the covert mission that few outside her circle had ever heard of. Tales of loss, of courage under fire, and of the ghosts that haunted her still. Her voice was steady but laced with the emotional weight of sacrifice and survival. The recruits listened, not as outsiders, but as comrades honoring the unspoken debts carried by one of their own. In that moment, Rowan transcended her role as just another soldier. She became a bridge, a keeper of memory, a symbol of resilience, and a quiet testament to the unseen battles fought by those who came before. The days pressed down with an increasing weight of tension and expectation. Each mission in their deployment zone demanded a precise balance of focus and restraint. Yet, the real battle that Rowan faced wasn't always fought in the field. Sometimes it was waged quietly, within the walls of the base itself. One afternoon, during a routine inspection, a new recruit, young, brash, and unaware of the history carried by those around her, crossed an invisible line. As Rowan stood in formation, the recruit openly mocked her. The words were sharp, cruel, and carried the careless arrogance of youth. "Hey, ghost girl," the recruit sneered loud enough for nearby soldiers to hear. "Think that tattoo makes you some kind of legend? Newsflash, you're just another recruit." Laughter bubbled up from a few nearby. The sound was harsh, echoing against the barracks walls, and it cut deeper than any wound. Rowan said nothing. She didn't respond. Instead, she held herself with quiet strength, the weight of every unspoken story settling on her shoulders. The room seemed to hold its breath, the energy shifting like a sudden gust of wind. Then, just as the moment threatened to spiral, the commanding officer entered. His presence was calm but unmistakable, the authority of years spent leading, of battles fought both on and off the field. His eyes swept across the room before resting on Rowan. Without a word, he stepped forward and unbuttoned his jacket, revealing a tattoo that mirrored hers, the black flame encircling a skull. A heavy silence fell. The recruits' laughter died instantly. They saw, in that quiet moment, the weight of history and honor they had been blind to until then. "Respect," the commanding officer said quietly, his voice steady and clear, "is earned, not given. And it is remembered." His words hung in the air, settling over the room like a mantle. The new recruit's face flushed with shame, and murmurs of apology rippled through the unit. The incident marked a turning point, not just for Rowan, but for everyone who had witnessed it. The mockery faded into whispered respect, the laughter replaced by nods of acknowledgement. Rowan's dignity was restored, not through confrontation or violence, but through presence, honor, and the undeniable truth of her service. In that moment, she was no longer the ghost of phantom dust. She was a symbol, a living testament to resilience and respect, carried forward quietly but powerfully by those who understood. The deployment came to an end as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty tarmac. The journey back was silent, heavy with the weight of memories, missions completed, friends lost, and promises both kept and broken. Rowan moved through the cramped transport aircraft with the same quiet grace she had shown throughout her service, her thoughts far away, navigating the unseen battlefields in her mind. Back home, the familiar sights and sounds greeted her with a bittersweet warmth. The quiet streets, the comforting hum of everyday life, and the people who had waited patiently, hoping for her safe return. The community had held on to that hope through long nights and lonely days, and now, as the veterans began to arrive, they gathered in small clusters, faces lit with eager anticipation but tempered by caution. Rowan stepped from the transport with steady footing, her presence calm but unassuming. She scanned the crowd, taking in the familiar faces, old friends, family members, and neighbors who had followed her journey from afar. Children ran ahead, their voices bright and clear, calling out her name like a beacon of hope. Old friends smiled, their expressions a blend of pride and relief. Despite the warmth surrounding her, Rowan remained reflective. The experiences she had carried with her were invisible scars, etched deep beneath the surface. Yet, in the presence of those who loved her, there was a rare softness, a momentary release from the burdens she bore alone. The quiet celebration continued with a local ceremony honoring the returning veterans. The mayor stepped forward to speak, her voice carrying a solemn respect that filled the small crowd. As she spoke, her eyes scanned the faces before her, finally settling on Rowan. With a respectful nod, she invited her to stand. Rowan rose, the murmurs of the crowd falling into silence. She moved forward with a steady resolve, each step a testament to the journey she had traveled. Then, in a moment charged with significance, she removed her jacket, revealing the tattoo on her back, the black flame encircling the skull, the emblem of Operation Phantom Dust. The crowd's reaction was immediate and profound. Silence washed over the gathering, heavy with recognition and awe. Then, as if a dam had broken, applause erupted, filling the air with a powerful, collective acknowledgement. No words were needed. The tattoo spoke volumes, a symbol of sacrifice, endurance, and quiet strength. In that instant, Rowan's story, once hidden beneath layers of silence and shadows, found its voice. The girl who had been mocked, underestimated, and overlooked now stood honored and recognized. The community embraced her not just as a veteran, but as a symbol of resilience and dignity. The applause continued as Rowan allowed herself a small, grateful smile. This was more than a ceremony. It was a reclaiming of respect, a restoration of honor long overdue. And as the sun set, painting the sky with hues of orange and gold, Rowan felt a quiet peace settle within her. The past and present had finally found balance, and the future, uncertain but hopeful, stretched out before her like an open road. The ceremony had ended hours ago, but the quiet reverberations of that day still hung in the air like a gentle breeze. The soft murmurs of gratitude from friends and strangers alike echoed in Rowan's mind, weaving a tapestry of respect and recognition she had long been denied. The proud glances exchanged among those who had witnessed her reveal settled over her like a warm cloak, an invisible shield of dignity and honor. As twilight faded and night crept in, Rowan found herself drawn away from the bustle of homecoming celebrations. She walked to the edge of a small, serene lake near her childhood home, a place untouched by the chaos of war or the noise of the world. The water lay perfectly still, reflecting the stars above with an almost sacred clarity, a mirror to both past and present. She sat on a smooth rock at the water's edge, the coolness of the evening air brushing against her skin. Slowly, almost reverently, Rowan reached behind and traced the tattoo on her upper back, the black flame encircling the skull, the emblem of Operation Phantom Dust. The ink wasn't just a mark on her skin. It was a living memory, an emblem etched in pain and perseverance, sacrifice and survival. It carried the weight of battles fought in shadows, of friends lost, and promises kept in silence. In that moment of stillness, the immense weight she had carried for so long felt lighter, not because the past had changed, but because it was finally seen, acknowledged, and honored by those who mattered. The ghosts that had haunted her nights seemed less fierce, their whispers softened by the quiet strength she had reclaimed. Her phone buzzed softly in her pocket, breaking the sacred silence. She pulled it out and saw a message from Avery. "We've got your six." Always. The phrase, military slang for watching your back, was simple but profound, a promise of unwavering support and loyalty. Rowan smiled, a rare and genuine warmth filling her chest. The loneliness she had felt for so long began to dissolve, replaced by a steady flame of connection and hope. She whispered softly to the night, her voice barely more than a breath, "Thank you." As the stars twinkled silently overhead, witnesses to her journey, Rowan felt a quiet peace settle within her soul. The ghost of Phantom Dust was no longer just a shadow lurking in the past. She was a living testament to courage, to resilience, to the unyielding strength of those who endure in silence. And with that peace came a new beginning. The path ahead was uncertain, yes, but it was hers to walk, with honor, dignity, and the quiet confidence that she was never truly alone. The night embraced her gently, and the stars above shimmered like silent sentinels watching over a warrior finally at rest. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more immersive tactical stories.